Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our today's event, which is our second panel, our webinar series on Why Women Write, hosted by the Department of Cross-Cultural and Regional Studies at the University of Copenhagen and IUAES Commission on Transnational Feminisms and Queer Politics. My name is Nasim Basiri, and I'm a PhD student in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Oregon State University and the co-founder of the Commission on Transnational Feminism and Queer Politics at the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences. I will be moderating today's session as usual with Ozlem who's with us here from the University of Copenhagen. And I invite Ozlem to introduce herself.
Thank you, Nasim. Hi, everyone. As Nasim said, my name is Ozlem. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Cross-Cultural and Regional Studies at Copenhagen University. And I am very glad to be moderating today's webinar with my dear friend and colleague, Nasim. So thanks for your participation.
Thank you so much, Ozlem Can. So today we are honored to have wonderful writers from all over the world, not all over the world, several parts of the world, joining us today to share their experiences with the writing and tell us that why do they write. They are Katia Ulysse, Nasrin Parvaz, Savita Singh, Saghi Ghahreman, and Neeti Singh. Our first speaker today is Neeti Singh, mystic, poet, translator, researcher, English academic, and casual classical singer. Provide context to Neeti Singh, who combines her interest in literature with the concept of Bhakti, translation, and cultural studies. She has over 20 years of university teaching behind her. And some of her literary publications include The Serpent of Slumber, a first book of poems published by Writers' Workshop in Kolkata, and Bhakti Poetry in Medieval India, its inception, context, and impact with reference to the works of Kabir and Nanak by Neeti herself, and then several other publications. Neeti Singh began her career as a reporter with the Indian Express, covering education and crime beats, and later took to teaching English at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, where she works now as Associate Professor of English. So welcome, Neeti, and we invite you to deliver your talk. Neeti?
Thank you, Nasim. Thank you, Ozlem. Very grateful to the universities for hosting, giving you the space to organize such a forum. And I must say I was very excited because this was not like writing a paper. This is the first time, one of those rare times when you have this opportunity to talk about yourself and your writing, and to be in such an august, audience with my sister writers. There are no brothers here, but sisters and brothers, if better be androgynous. I'd rather not be black or white. Gray is good. So I have arranged my 20-minute talk in 3 small sections. And it begins with a poem, a very short one, followed by a funny anecdote which fittingly makes a point. After that, I briefly describe a dark period in life which taught me some tough lessons. And then towards the end of my talk, I briefly look at a work that I have recently finished writing and translating. And this concerns Punjab's first major woman poet, Piro, whose life was ridden with several transgressions. First, my own poem. from a cluster titled Esoteric Verse. I'll just read a couple of stanzas. Thoughts are a river gushing past herbed hills, down, down, down a treacherous cliff. Behind the falling curtain is a cave that cannot be reached. I'm as wicked as the crook next door, and as innocent or corrupt as that cow in the street. He that loves me is even more wicked, more innocent than I. That's why I've stayed in love with him. Writing for me has been like therapy, especially post-divorce. I would sit before a blank page filled with pain and emerge at the end of the exercise with a piece of writing that had alchemized the pain and anger into something that was exquisite, aesthetic, and deeply satisfying. Writing offered me solace. However fragile, it alchemized the rejection, the humiliation that one faced as a single woman and parent. Come to think of it, writing is a strange space of paradox. It is an act of traveling inwards so that one can um, make some change outwards. It is an act that is performed in a space of silence in order to break certain kinds of silences outside. So that's quite paradoxical and very advantageous to the feminine gender, I would say, because especially in India, silence, and I think world over, it's a stereotype. A woman that is silent is more agreeable in patriarchal systems, right? But writing is something, it's like a backdoor entry to speech for us women. Just a thought, just an observation before I move on to the next piece. So now I would like to share with you an anecdote, a very telling experience I had way back in 1989-90. I had just finished my post-graduation in English and joined the Indian Express newspapers in Ahmedabad as an apprentice reporter. It was my first day at the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, and along with other reporters from various newspapers, I found myself waiting in the lounge for a meeting with the corporators for the day's updates and bylines. Mind you, I was the only woman there, while the rest were all men and much senior to me, both in experience and years. And all of them were quite ill-behaved. A couple of them even sat squatting on one of the tables, belching away, talking loudly and talking obscenities, farting, chewing pan, and generally being very, very boorish. And I was a chit of a girl, eager to learn and quite accepting of the local ways. I continued sitting on a chair, a bit shocked at the general atmosphere around me, but observant and eager to learn, Back at the office in the evening, our chief editor asked us to submit for a weekly column a light write-up of about 500, 600 words. And I wrote in a fun way my experience, my first day at the Ahmedabad municipality. Next day, when I walked into the reporter's lounge for daily updates, to my utter surprise, there was a strange silence in the room. The raucousness of the previous day was missing, which was quite strange. But later I discovered that my write-up in the Indian Express had been taken seriously. After that, those male reporters were quite well behaved and even a bit respectful towards me. So that was my very first experience, regarding the power of the pen. There were several others, of course, as a reporter. But when I began writing somewhere around 9 or 10 years of age, it was out of sheer joy. The very experience was so creative and so beautiful. And writing my own poems was also a way of responding and connecting with poets that I admired and that I had been reading. Baudelaire, Rilke, Coleridge, Wordsworth. Eventually, of course, one graduated to writing for the joy of being published. And still later, one wrote for the therapeutic relief that writing brought. I had begun with poetry and short stories. Later, when my daughter was about 6 and 8, I wrote 2 one-act plays which were performed in local theatre festivals. Then I began writing a novel, which had to be left halfway when suddenly in 2006, I found myself alone with a 10-year-old daughter, little money, in a strange neighborhood with a new job and no clue as to what next. I bled through the written word. And then one day I just burnt it all up in the kitchen sink. So for 4 years, this was a scene. And thereafter, after burning all that in the kitchen sink, I said bye bye to all that grieving. And from that point in time, I have been writing a different kind of writing, writing that is more formal, more authorial, and academic. It took me another 8 years to emerge from stereotype and alchemize myself and my daughter into a space of newly forged narratives of strength, hard work, and grace. My writing today comes from a better space, I hope. I have written mostly to meet academic ends, and yet I have also written to serve, to recover, and to represent abused voices from the margins of silence. My translations and discourses include Baba Bule Shah, Bhai Jeta, recently Desraj Kali's novel Shanti Parav, which was published by Orient Black Swan. So I've translated it and, you know, with an extensive introduction and stuff. And Kali, he's a Dalit writer. He comes from a Chamar family. He had to give up school when he was in standard 8 because the family was going through a lot of poverty. And he would carry carrion and flesh to the market and stuff. And he today is the Sartaj of Punjabi literature. The kind of fiction he writes. Shanti Parav, the novel that I've translated recently, and which was published, is a highly experimental work of fiction which blends in with history and nonfiction. I would recommend reading it. And a very recent work of mine, which I've just finished, is about Punjab's first woman poet, Piro. Piro, who was a tawayaf in one of the kothas of Lahore in early 19th century. She was orphaned and abandoned very early in life. And by the age of 16, she was sold by her uncle to a brothel house in Hiramandi, Lahore. And from there, a few years later, she miraculously escaped with the help of a client and found her way to the spiritual sanctuary of Sant Baba Gulab Das, who was a strapping, scholarly Sikh guru and very forward in his views and 100 years old. The new life that Piro forged for herself, along with Baba Gulab Das as her spiritual partner and beloved, the distance, that she traveled from being an orphan and being a tawayaf in a kotha in Lahore to being a motherly figure, a saint poet and partner of Gulab Das, these are no mean achievements. Not only did she abscond from the kotha, she also renounced Islam, her birth religion. She was so disillusioned with the pimps, the proprietress, and their collaborators who were all followers of the Kalma, and yet they ill-treated the Nautch girls. They hit them and abused them, and then called them daughters. In one of her poems, Piro questions, what kind of a religion was this that taught its people to abuse and violate its own women? If Piro's escape was not cause enough for scandal, what seemed even more incredulous to her former owners was her next choice of profession. From being a harlot and a Musalman, she had chosen to live the life of a hermit and a Hindu. That too, under the stewardship of a Hindu Sikh. Baba Gulab Das was a Sikh Jat and who had generally abandoned religion, and he was into Vedas and into spirituality. So, well, in my work on Piro, I have translated into English 100 odd poems of hers, kafis and her Ghori Geets and her the Barama. And around these translations, I have woven a commentary. Sorry for the dogs, the street dogs. I don't know if you can hear them. Anyway.
Oh, that's totally fine.
Oh, good Lord. I did not anticipate that. I would have shut the window.
Yeah, yesterday I was I was in a class and actually there were several dogs barking and we had no problems. And we don't have any problem with this either.
Thank you, Nasim. Okay. So I have translated 100 of her poems, and around these translations, I have woven a commentary that is based on academic, biographical, and literary inputs. Considering the extent and quality of her writing, Piro should rightfully be acknowledged as Punjab's first major woman poet. Unfortunately, even today, her poems do not find space in anthologies of Punjabi poetry. Very recently, I reviewed, a manuscript for a publishing house, and there was no mention of Piro. It's an anthology of Punjabi poetry from medieval Punjab to modern times, but Piro and a few others were just not there. So this is the kind of writing I have done in the past few years of my life, translations mostly and discourse, giving voice to voices that are brave and brilliant, but cause discomfort among mainstream patriarchal narratives. Before I end, I would like to mention one episode from Piro's life, which really gives me a lot of joy, and it's incredulous to see a Tawayaf turn into. Of course, she was mystically inclined, and she wrote mystical songs even as a Tawayaf, and she sang and she performed, and she was a charming, like a star courtesan, in the brothel house there. But after she joined up with Baba Gulab Das, they used to have these Hori festivals. The Hori festival is a festival of colors, in India. So in the Dera of Baba Gulab Das, which is called Gulab Dasi Dera, they used to have these Hori festivals, and they would throw open the doors, the gates of the Dera. Dera is like an ashram, like a sanctuary. They would throw open the gates of the Dera, and all of Piro's Tawayaf friends, her harlot friends from Lahore and neighboring areas would come. And it's a festival of color and dance and music. And Gulab Das and Piro together are said to have helped a lot of harlot friends of Piro's to resettle, to get married, or to live lives out of the brothel house. And this was happening in early 19th century. So it's amazing. And this is what writing has done. The fact that she could write, and we can, we can listen to her story, we can learn about her. That is amazing. So speaking as a woman for women, I would say we write so we can be heard. We write because writing brings us relief, recognition, and joy. We write because writing empowers us and helps us help ourselves and those that have been silenced and have stories that need to be heard. Women write because writing is an act of holding hands. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neeti. These were very inspiring and really interesting stories. So also thank you for sharing your experience with writing with us today. Hopefully we'll have some questions for you later. And now we're gonna go to our second speaker, which is Katia de Ulysse. Katia de Ulysse is a fiction writer and educator born in Haiti. Her work has been published in Rumpus, the Hong Kong Review, Peregrine and the Caribbean Writer, Meridian's Feminism, Race, Transnationalism, Calabash, among others. Anthologies include Un Sourire, Haitien, Us Against Alzheimer, Haiti Noir, Butterfly Way, Brassage, Mosaic, and others. Drifting, a critically acclaimed collection of short story, was published in 2014. Library Journal calls her novel Mouth Don't Speak a captivating, beautifully written novel that recalls Toni Morrison's Paradise. Ulysse has written books for children, including Fabiola goes to school in English and Haitian Creole. She received a Master of Arts from Notre Dame of Maryland University, and she has taught in Baltimore City, Maryland for 15 years. Welcome to this event, Katia, and we invite you to share your works with us.
Thank you so much, Nasim. I'm so happy to be here. Like I told you guys before we started, I was so incredibly nervous, but I'm so happy to be here, so honored to be among these amazing, phenomenal women and friends, writers. Thank you again for having me. And it's very auspicious that when I received the invitation, because I just read a book about a young girl. I think it's called The Missing Bird. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but about a young girl who was married into a family basically for the dowry, because the groom was ill, and he was 13, and she was soon widowed and sent to that city of widows where she just mourned. It was just very interesting. And right after that, I got the word from you, and I thought, I've got to do this. I'm so happy about it. This is wonderful. I actually did not plan to read. I showed my little books over here. Got a little collection there, Mouth Don't Speak and Drifting, which I'm very proud of, published by Akashi Books. I did not plan to read, but what I did was I asked a few women writers whom I know, some of them well, some of them not so well, but I wanted to understand why they write. And I wanted to see if there was a connection between their reasons for writing and why I write. I wanted to understand the connection, but I've changed my mind. I'm a lady, I can do that, right? So I'm gonna read for you a couple paragraphs from something that I just started. It was called, and I'm doing this for a student whom I love, who was bullied very badly, and I promised him I would write a book with his name in it. My husband said, next time don't make him the main character, because this thing has been a pain in my where for about 2 years. So I will start read the first two paragraphs for you. And the book is called Across the Concrete Sky. It says, 7:24 p.m., March 2020. Very, very now, right? So destiny lay on the flagstones like a half-hatched bird. A collage of lacerations covered her bare arms and legs. Raised welts varied in length between a toy soldier's machine gun and the sword-shaped leaves of bearded irises. One side of her face belonged on the cover of Teen Vogue, the other side on a poster tacked to a corkboard about the dangers of hazing. This was not a hazing. Echupe knelt next to her, crying out her name and praying for whatever part of her that was still on his side of the sky to stay put. He did not notice her broken fingernails when he wrapped his own fingers around her hands, whispering, "Squeeze if you can hear me." Destiny remained motionless and as mute as the dogwood and crabapple trees that surrounded Mother's Garden's unkempt acres. The gardener had abandoned his trowels and pruning shears after he was shot last fall, an ordinary mugging gone wrong. He survived, but he never returned to the garden. One of several metal rakes lay on a heap of soggy, bad, and burnt orange leaves that never got bad. I'm gonna stop right there. So that's my little story that I'm finishing. Now I will share with you words from these amazing women writers. First person, Elizabeth Jaikaran, who's a New York-based author, poet, and attorney. She says, I'm going to quote her. She said, "I became a writer at 8 years old, having discovered that it was the key to my free and unrestricted expression. And that is ultimately the very reason why I continue to write, to preserve my freedom. When I write, no one can ever interrupt me or tell me to shush. When I write, no one can ever misquote me. When I write, I become a transient voice box for others who identify with what I'm saying, but may not have the ability to express it themselves. When I write, my pen makes me immortal. That is why I write. So that's Elizabeth. I love that. And from our grande dame of Haitian literature, Yannick Lahens, whom I adore, she says, writing is a passionate journey. Literature saves me every day. Literature fills a void within, a missing piece that she fills with stories about mystery, innocence, beauty, and even violence. If only violence could exist only in words, yes? And she says she keeps trying. She writes to give voice to all that's been silenced. She lives in Haiti, and she says, I do not feel isolated from the big world, because when I write about Haiti, I write about the world. Haiti is the key to understanding of the construction of modernity, of modernité. This is Yannick Lahens. Jamaican writer Patricia Powell says, she writes, it was a way for her to bring back the ones she had lost to life. She says, I can see their faces shaking again with laughter and feel their hands on my heart. Later, writing became even more. It was a way of making meaning out of things I don't understand, a way to probe the psyche and bring the hidden gems to the surface. And that was Patricia Powell. Michelle Fievre, a Haitian sister who's in Miami, love her work. She says, I write because I need to tame the pain, turn it into something concrete and magnificent, so that the beauty of life can supersede the little uglies we carry, each of us, inside our hearts. That's Michelle Fievre. Bernice McFadden, famed author, love her book, Sugar. Just love Bernice McFadden. She's like written 1,000 books. She says, I write to breathe life back into memory, to remind Black people and others that we are complex and remarkable human beings with stories that should be told and shared down through the generations. I'm gonna try to move faster. Morora Yedije, author of several books. She lives in Washington, D.C., and she says, stories of my hometown are often monolithic and eclipsed by government platitudes. She says, writing is her way of bringing the history, difficulties, and triumphs of extraordinary people who live in her city. Wyatt Moore, author from Liberia. Wyatt just finished, wrote She Would Be King, and he's now working on a memoir. She wrote, I'm a host of paradoxes. None of you. Nobody else, right? She's a host of paradoxes. Thank you for saying that, Wyatt. She says, when it comes to this, I write both to escape and to return, both to learn, and also with the goal of self-destruction as a means of self-love. And Cardinal, who is the phenomenal woman at where I am doing the, Vermont College of Fine Arts. She writes, she's from Puerto Rico. I write because the single most important thing in my life has always been connecting with people, whether it's talking about grief with a woman in front of me online at the supermarket, or writing about what it was like to grow up with an addict parent. It's always been about connection, and weaving my own stories into the work is a way of breaking bread with my dead. Can you believe that line? It is a way of breaking bread with my dead. Connecting with them even though they are no longer here. Jennifer McCauley, author of Scour On and Scour Off, NEA award winner. She says, I write because I feel compelled to write. I can't stop myself from doing it. Okay? And we have also Gianni Bogard, who is an amazing poet, Haitian poet. And she writes, it is in her own skin. She wrote this poem. It is beautiful in French. And we tried to translate it, but we lost a little bit. I have long searched the road for my inner self. And as she does this through writing, not looking for the mask, the pageantry, but my natural, unvarnished self, unadorned, without accoutrements or false pretenses, just me wearing my own pain and my own tears, with the scars greeting the curious, like a poem losing its virginity to life's blows, like a poked eye's breath, confusing the road to its suffocation, to its finiteness outside of oneself, confined. That's Shiani Bogard. She's just powerful. And so through reading all of these women's reasons for writing, it just kind of helps me understand that I think the one thread woven through this entire stream is for survival, and to maintain a sisterhood. And I love what Anne says, to break bread with the dead and to breathe life into memory. So thank you so much for the opportunity to have been able to share these powerful women's words with you.
Thank you so much, Katia. Your presence here is really, really precious. So, the first time I got familiar with Haitian literature, Haitian feminist literature and poetry was through Gina Ulysse poetry.
Stay right there.
She's a professor at Feminist Studies Department at UC Santa Cruz, as well as she came to our university for a workshop, and she was amazing. Really, really
She should
amazing.
be, because she's my little sister.
Yeah. And you both, yeah. So, wow, that is amazing. And then I got a little bit sad that day when I saw her, because I found lots of similarities between feminist Haitian literature and Iranian feminist literature. And I said, wow, why we're not getting familiar with these women's literature in Iran, why they're not translated because of censorship. And that was that was the first thing that I decided to do. I said, why I will bring Iranian and Haitians together. So this is happening right now. And thank you for that. Your presence, your talk, your, sharing your experiences with us today was really precious. And of course, this is the beginning of taking you to Iran. We're going to take you to Iran.
Going. Yes, I will be there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to go to our third speaker today, Savita. So I just changed the order of speaking a little bit today. All right. So Savita Singh is a political theorist and a feminist poet from Delhi. She writes in Hindi and English and has 3 collections to her name. Apne Jaisa Jawan and Swapa Samai, and there is another collection called Nintai or Ratai that was published in 2005. She has a collection of 50 poems, and her work has been translated into French, a collection of assorted poems, Je suis la maison des étoiles, and she has co-authored an anthology in the world women genre, 7 Leaves, 1 Autumn. Her poetry has been translated also into German, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, and Catalonian, among others. She has a collection of poems translated into Odia and by Time Pass Publications. Savita Singh was awarded the Hindi Academic Award in 2017, and so many other awards I see here. Her poems have appeared in national and international journals widely. She works in the area of gender studies and has written on feminist theories of state economy and literature. So she's a professor in the School of Gender and Development Studies at the Indira Gandhi National Open University in New Delhi. So thank you, Savita, for being here with us today, and welcome. Savita? Oh, Savita, you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Good evening, Nasim, and my co-writers, friends, feminists. Should I be very formal and thank the Department of Cross-Cultural and Regional Studies at the University of Copenhagen, and to IUAES. I think it's a wonderful event, if I may say, where so many of us have come to share our experience of writing, and also to find answer and give answer, maybe share on an answer as to why do we write. So why do we write, and why do I write, for example? These are two questions basically, which I will try to answer in a very theoretical manner. But let me begin with a very simple way of talking about why do we write. I think we write because we genuinely wonder about ourselves. From the very beginning, as a child, in fact, we experience silences within us when we question as to why people are behaving the way they are behaving, why things are as they are, why there are squirrels around, why there are birds around. We watch everything with this inquiry, this genuine inquiry that any language speaking species, human beings in particular, they will have. So to name things, to understand things by naming, to understand things by questioning the naming itself. Later on, I will talk a little bit about Helen Sixtus, who's my great inspiration as far as feminist writing is concerned. So these things, I think we have. Most of us, we begin like this. And if we can retain that authentic, pure sense of inquiry and inquisitiveness, then we basically retain our writer. The writer is born with this kind of innocent but genuine, authentic perception of why things are as they are. So, like all of you, I would like to read one poem, and you'll get a sense as to what happens in the interior space of a writer who is not a writer as yet in a declared sense, but a writer as a born writer. So the poem is something like this. It's called Unattended Things. My heart was missing its usual steps this morning. The dewdrops were vanishing before I could approach them with my unsure feet. Rose petals on the ground, perhaps fallen late at night, looked so much like what had been lying within me unattended for long. My mind had paced strangely this morning. The red and blue, the favorite green of a sky presaging rain were changing into colors I had not seen. Earlier, where there were words, there was only a patch of confounding silence, and all that was a void of some sort I knew almost well was now a ditch full of pinkish mud. Instead of clarity, there was uneasy compassion. The neighbor's cat vexed me so often. She sat in his balcony, postured so meekly that for once I thought it was such a sad way to be, especially if it was drizzling on a Sunday. Sometimes this is how things are, even the mornings. As this morning looked today, maybe this is how I saw the morning showing itself to me, as someday those unattended things, lying like sad cats within, would appear as they ought to in my eyes. So the sincerity brought to our own feelings and perceptions with a sense of waiting, the sense of words to come for these feelings to be finally captured, articulated, and then put into some form we call poetry. So the theoretical position is that we all write, we all are writers because we are human beings. We all are writers because we have the capacity to understand, to imagine, to save things in our memory, to tap into our subconscious. We are very complex beings. This complexity is something that I want to also discuss in terms of feminist or feminine or women's writing. Because I don't think that women write spontaneously. There's a complex mechanism for them to write. If I simply jump from here to what I wanted to speak earlier in terms of French feminism. See, while one is writing at the early stage in this particular manner that I just read a poem, because it has retained that innocence of a writer, obviously to be, of course, fractured when you grow up, because politics of writing for women is gruesome. It's so hard, it's so cruel. You actually face the cruelty of patriarchal world when you begin to write. Because writing means you are rewriting your own body. You're rewriting, you're articulating all your pain. You're putting in word things that you have experienced. So in a way, writing is creating another body or extending your body, making it into a text. The fact that we make it into a text, it actually is an invitation in its act of opening yourself up to other people. Whereas patriarchy, or the symbolic order of patriarchy, wants you to be hiding. Your interior self has got to be something that must be drowned in dark silence. That is what is acceptable, because it retains the feminine subjective world, retains it in its memory, and its even in its half-lighted rationality. It knows how one has become a woman. The entire experience, patriarchal experience of being shortened into a smaller creature or codified into an unequal person. This inequality, that's this order, the patriarchy that I'm talking about, structures from its base to its top. That is to say, from its economy to politics to literature and culture. It is the same woman. Woman, what I mean is a particular kind of text with certain codes, or being unequal without having a real self, without having the original self as a reflection of the primordial or main self that is masculine. It is this experience that comes in the writing. That is why when Helen Sixtus wrote book, the laughter of Medusa, it was like bringing out everything. Medusa's own experiences of being raped, of being brutalized, and then her transmutation and transformation into someone who becomes powerful because of these experiences, and the way she finally tries to defeat the order. All of this in a very symbolic manner is what is the narrative of women's writing. So it's a very political act I would say that I write with this understanding. I am a political, my writing is political. For me, feminism is political. And I don't write for my personal liberation. I write for liberation of female gender, which means that my experiences, my bodily experiences, my mental and physical, my mental and psychological experiences, they all have to go into a process of complex writing, which is accessible to all women and men. So and this is a political act, that you become a public person. You defy the irrepressible measures that patriarchy takes you to put into the private sphere. By writing, you become a public person. You go into that space where you can be read, where its meaning can be deciphered by people in the way they want to, which actually means that you submit yourself to a kind of openness and plurality which masculinity doesn't want. They're very happy if you remain unexpressed, if you're not trying to articulate yourself. So in that sense, writing is a very dangerous thing to do. You will have to suffer for it. You may be denied the basic thing that any human being needs is love. You may not be considered even as a person who could command love and respect and sympathy. In a very oblique manner, you will be thought to be daring enough to become autonomous and so face the consequences of being an autonomous person. Come to the public space where all the bloodshed takes place. All the politics of meaning breaks you into pieces. So today it's not a lecture that I'm giving, but I can tell you that they have found the French feminists, and I totally agree with them because in my own experience and in my own writing, I have done it, that you also have to look at the fact as to how meaning is created. You know, a lot of people ask me, why do you think women should be claiming that their writing is a feminist? Writing is writing, right? That kind of thing. And it's often asked by men or by women who have got patriarchal head and a feminine body. You know, this is a kind of a typical thing. And it sometimes baffles you, but it doesn't baffle me anymore, because I know now that patriarchy is co-produced. It is not only produced by men, it is also produced by women. So women also have a very masculine head. They believe in their rationality, in the rationality, masculine rationality. They think that this is how the world is structured, but it is not. The moment you say that there is no unitary order, that there is no single truth, that there is no way rationality can play the most dominant role in structuring the order, the moment you open it up to recognizing emotions, recognizing multiplicities of existing meaning of the same word, you see, something that it should come in feminist writing, how we can create double meaning, how multiple meaning of the same word by way of contextualizing it into our own lives. That is to say, our unique experiences are the context where words can find new meanings. It is this, I think, it is this that is why I write. Because if you bring in your own experience, however dark it is, however painful it is, it will help in restructuring the order. I wouldn't like to have order, basically. I would like to have a field, you know, in which we wander and allow people to have a lot more space than the order, the symbolic order creates. Because you are sequestered, you are crumpled into oneself, to one language speaking person, and all these notions of hierarchy, superiority, inferiority, and so. I mean, I can't tell you what all goes on and how much we suffer silently. The fact that I began to write in Hindi, I want to tell you all why. it was not my first language in which I was writing. I was writing in English, completely colonized education system in terms of language, at least. The English language is the medium where rich and powerful go and study. All these schools, all our schools, they have English medium. So you learn more about literature of English-speaking world, Western world, than you learn about your own. Fortunately, in my own house, my uncle was a great lover of Hindi literature. And he would read out, poems, great poems of Hindi writers like Haryod, Pant, Smitanandan Pant, Nirala, Dinkar, beautiful poets of modern India. But people coming from my class, my generation, they were reading Wordsworth, daffodils. So when I began to really seriously write, their poems used to come to me. There used to be some sort of a noise, not a melodious one. It was like a very cantankerous noise, competing for space, competing for inclusion. And I had no time to learn Hindi properly. I began to start writing in Hindi only after I finished my PhD at McGill University, where I understood because I was studying with a hermeneutician, a philosopher called Charles Taylor, who was a hermeneutician, who actually taught me what is language, how meaning is created, what is literature. And then I realized that to get in touch with myself, I need to go back. There is no other way for me to go back to myself except through language. That is Hindi. That is Hindi spoken in my family. My grandparents, my parents, servants of the house, they all speak Hindi. I was like an alien in that house. I began to reflect more and more. And once you begin to do this, then you also realize that your own family is very patriarchal. You are treated in a certain way, and male members are treated in a certain way. In northern part of India, families coming from upper caste and upper class, they have two houses. One is called Ghar, one is called Bahar. Bahar is outside where men live. It's also a fully well-built house. And then there is Ghar, house, in which women live. Imagine the patriarchal separation in terms of spacing. So probably my grandmother would not go to Bahar. She would, most of the time, she will spend time in what is called Ghar, and in the courtyard and outside in the boundary walls of, even though it's a very huge house, but she wouldn't venture into the other part. So then you begin to think as to why it is so. Even when I grew up a little bit, like when I was not a child, I was also asked not to go there, you see, because I have become a grown-up person. I'm not supposed to be venturing into that space. It's as stark as this. So writing for women, for me, is writing my experience of being brought up in a patriarchal system, so well structured, so well symbolically ordered, that you do not even feel that you are basically a bird in a golden cage. You think it's quite a natural thing, because these things are given, these values, the patriarchal values are given to you in a most loving manner. A daughter is loved, a wife is loved, as long as you do not cross the boundaries, transcend the boundary set up by this order. So I am writing in this particular situation. So the first poem that I wrote, the first poem was, of course, there were many, many first poems basically, but the one that actually became the starting point for me to be a writer, to be a poet in Hindi, is called Main Kiski Aurat Hoon, whose woman am I? I began with this question. And in the first collection, Apne Jaisa Jeevan, which would in English it would be Life Like Its Own, this particular poem is included. And if I don't want to boast, I could say that it is supposed to be the first feminist poem in Hindi. It's translated in so many languages. And the first collection itself received Hindi Academy's award. It's so well received by, as if this question was awaited, as if they wanted somebody to ask this question for Hindi literature to sort of expand itself in terms of its own experience, meaning and experiences. So I began to write both, and I was writing in English already, but I was writing in 2 languages. And it is so hard, I can't tell you. It is so hard because languages are not just tools. Languages are a way of life. It's a life world. It has experiences, it has meaning, it has structures. All of them they represent different worldviews. So I am only glad that I'm not a fractured person. I must say I'm together. I just know how to straddle, basically. And it has enriched my own writing quite a bit. I think that I would like to end my little conversation here with you all by saying that I was most amazed when I began to read Helen Six's Anne Irigaray and Julia Kristeva. I find them so very close to what I have been feeling, and I had been feeling before I read them. I felt that they were speaking my own language, and they had the same intentions which I had. I wanted to break down the hierarchical structure that have been put in place in a very sophisticated manner by patriarchal ideology, the symbolic order. Women should write, and I write, to create a disorder and dissonance in this order, and write in such a way that possibility of enslaving, a possibility of unequalizing anybody, including other creatures of nature, is made an impossibility. And it's a huge task. I have been writing quite a bit on ecofeminism precisely for this reason, because you can see the duplication of the language and intention and philosophy which dominated women. The same ideology was imposed on nature. So the destruction and torture of women's body and of nature is very similar. So as a feminist writer, a poet, I write to free myself from this sophisticated structure, which is very hard, and write in a political manner. I am not afraid. I always sort of gather my courage whenever I have to oppose, and I have been resisting. I am very, very oppositional in my writing. I have been resisting political orders, political views of people, various forms of oppression that, women and other men in our culture, in our country face, like, on caste basis, the oppression of Dalit people. I am totally against it. And I have raised my voice. I am very much against rape culture that we have in this country. Cannot be tolerated. So the 3 collection that Nasim was talking about, Apne Jaisa Jeevan, which began life like its own. Then the second one was Neend Thi aur Raat Thi. There was sleep and there was night, in which I worked on language itself. A feminist language is required to deliver new symbols, to maintain new symbols, to create new symbols, and deliver new. And the third collection is called Swapna Samay, which is called Dream Time, in which I have experimented with various kinds of forms. I've written long poems, long poems, 5, 6 of them in that last third collection. Narrative poems, I would call them. They carry sentence by sentence, they carry what is called, what Helen Sixtus and other French feminists have called, our libidinal force. So the poetry, each poem is like a fragment of my own feminine body, with all the jouissance, all the desires that women have, which are often suppressed by this symbolic order. You're not supposed to be expressing your desire. So desire acquires, you can't stop it. I couldn't stop it even if I wanted to. The poems became so long. Then I realized it is nothing but an expression of who I am, and it must. I was very afraid because women haven't written long poems. Women have written short poems. They have followed men, duplicated them for acceptance, whatever. But I just dismissed even this privilege, even though I was praised quite a bit by Hindi critics, writers, and I've been translated, as Nasim was pointed out, in so many languages, in French, in German, Spanish, and quite a bit. In fact, I have a collection in French, and I have a collection in Oriya, which is one of our Indian languages, full volume, then bilingual translations, so on so. But the journey that I'm giving to you all in terms of how I've journeyed as a poet, you'll see that book by book, text by text, I have managed to liberate myself from very many shackles of patriarchal structure that we have in our country. I'm one person who's not afraid to flout, to violate, to live in
Savita,
excess, as it is called. Yeah.
So sorry for interrupting you, but
thank you so much. I stop it here.
Time, so
I stop it here, Nasim. Yeah, I just wrapped up. I said I live in excess of meaning and articulations provided to us, which we have inherited. I always try to transcend that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're done with your speech?
Yes.
Okay,
done,
thank you so much. I thought you have a few more words to say.
No.
Thank you so much for beautifully speaking about your experiences with writing, and also thing that I really appreciated was protesting the injustices and also the pain associated with violence and racial discrimination here in this speech today. So thank you so much for that. We're going to our next speaker, which is Nasrin Parvaz. We're so honored to have Nasrin Parvaz with us today. Nasrin became a civil rights activist when the Islamic regime took power in 1979. She was arrested in 1982, tortured, and spent 8 years in prison. Some of her books are One Woman's Struggle in Iran, a prison memoir, and The Secret Letters from X to A, published by Victorina Press in 2018. Nasrin's prison memoir was published in Farsi in 2002 and in Italian in 2006. She also published a novel in Farsi about the massacre of prisoners in 1988 in Iran, where she was an eyewitness. Some of Nasrin's shorter stories won awards, and her poetry, stories, and translations have been published in different anthologies in different parts of the world. She has given talks on the violation of human rights in Iran, both in Farsi and in English. Nasrin is also a painter, and her paintings found their ways to so many exhibitions and later on postcards, and she studied for a degree in psychology and gained an MA in international relations. She lives in London now. Welcome, Nasrin, and we are so happy to have you here today with us.
Thank you, Nasim Jan. And I'm glad to be here. My struggle to have a voice in Iran resulted in me being sent to prison, as Nasim said. There are lost friends who were executed for undergoing same struggle. I first found writing as a means of communicating with other prisoners in secret when I was behind bars. I wrote letters and hid them in secret places for my friends who would read and write back. In those letters, for which we would be tortured if guards found them, we discussed issues that mattered to us and we learned from each other. 3 years after my release, I escaped from Iran. I wanted to tell the world about the systemic violence in the country. After my Farsi was published, which Nasim talked about it, and it was translated into Italian by Amir Gorkinpour. And after I published The Temptation, I was keen to publish my memoir in English. So in 2008, I sent several chapters of my memoir to Curtis Brown, a literary agent. The reader replied saying she found my novel interesting, but as she had not fallen in love with it, she could not take it on in today's tough fiction marketplace. This was to characterize the subsequent responses to my work from a range of literary agencies and publishers whose answers were either careless or full of praise, but then wary of presenting the public with challenging material, feeling that readers in the UK would not be able to identify closely enough with my experiences to merit publication. Imagine my surprise and disappointment to discover that I couldn't have a voice here too. Discovering that censorship exists even in Western democracy of such as Britain, a censorship that is of a much more subtle order than that of my native country. This censorship helped the English language to colonize the publishing world. As you may know, only 2 to 3% of books published in other languages are translated into English. It is so, while reverse the statistics show that 40 to 60% of English books are translated to other languages. Going back to why women write, I think we can't explore this question without looking at the gender-specific barriers in the publishing world. We also need to ask why women write less and are published less. Many women have more than one job. They work outside of the house. Some raise children. Some are wives and have to cook for their husbands and children. They look after too many people, so as a result, they don't have moments of solitude to look after themselves and think about their own needs, such as writing. Unfortunately, the reality of women's lives has not changed over the centuries and are conflicting with their ambitions. Even for women who earn money, lack of time can prevent them from following their artistic needs. You can't claim back your time when you marry or have children, or Of course, there are more reasons for the gender imbalance in the writing world, and they go hand in hand with the fact that women are still discriminated against when it comes to submitting their work for publication. This discrimination is much deeper against people of color, especially women. So, difficulties for writers like me are more than only misogyny. Racism is another. Recently, there has been a wave of advertising about equal opportunities and the opening of doors to the less advantaged, including refugee writers within big agents and publishers. But how many of these disadvantaged writers have been published by big publishers? My prison memoir and novel were published in 2018 by a small publisher. My novel is based on the interrogation center I was in for 6 months, which the Islamic regime then turned into a museum, whilst saying that it was only used by the Shah's regime. Now I've finished a novel which is about an outcast woman living with her family in a village in Iran. I think writing is a form of freedom of expression, and therefore women write for the same reason that men might write. However, since women have for so long been barred from acting on their ambitions, they have turned to language as a way of dealing with their inner traumas and influencing the world. So, because of systemic patriarchal oppression, women's writing is not only an act of disobedience, it's also inherently different from men's writing because of it. Women turn their shared experience, such as pain and anxiety, into stories. Some women start writing in response to the brutal patriarchy that they experience and to break through creative barriers. Writing helps women find themselves and cope with distress. Many feel good after they write, and it can become such a habit that after a while it becomes a need as great as the air they breathe. Yet, in some male-dominated societies, the act of writing by women is such a disobedience act that they have to keep it secret. Some women bloggers in Iran have said that they write under different names for two reasons. One is fear that the regime would find them and arrest them. This happens a lot, and right now there are bloggers in prison. The second reason these women do not put their names under their writing is that if their male relatives found them, they would kill them. Of course, women's writing must have influenced women's free thinking and free love. And these must have been among the reasons that patriarchal societies and institutions make it difficult for women to have a voice. Going back to why I write, I have to say that most of my writings show a snapshot of the Iranian regime's cruelty. such as their arresting people for talking and writing. For me, writing is a means of struggle and fighting back. A right against systemic violence, execution, prison, sexual apartheid, and lack of civil rights. I write about people's collective struggle for their civil rights and how they were arrested and executed. Prisoners were tortured to do confessions in public in front of other prisoners or even on TV before their execution. Still, today prisoners are tortured into condemning their views as well as their activism and also forced to admit to criminal activities that they have never done. These confessions are broadcast on TV and are also used to condemn people who have been arrested in peaceful demonstrations to execution. I have to add that there were assassinations of which many took place in Western countries, but those Western governments turned a blind eye on those crimes because of economic ties. I also have writings that deal with more general systemic violence, such as that which takes place in England. You can see systemic violence in the streets of London, where every winter homeless people die from the cold. This happens despite empty houses outnumbering homeless people 10 times over. All these are things that I write about. I like being able to write in a way that will have an effect on the reader. I want to move them by making them think about things like prison, immigration, racism, poverty, patriarchy, invasion, and also human kindness. I would like to hold a mirror up to the society to make sure people see things that they may pass by without noticing because their minds are preoccupied or they may have learned not to pay attention to their surroundings. Both my writing and painting are about our historical time. Brutal power politics and social injustice all over the world and collective trauma these places on people. I write to change minds and change the world for a better place. Nasim, my talk here is finished, but if I have time, I would like to add something else.
Yes, please.
Okay, it's a request actually. I would like to add that at the moment I'm trying to save the lives of 16 young men who were arrested in a peaceful demonstration and condemned to execution. They are workers who were struggling with their life expenses and joined the demonstration to protest this. Navid Afkari was on my list. He was executed. I hope those who listen to this sign and share my petition and we can save these men's lives. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. We will make sure that we share the petition online. And thank you so much for sharing this wonderful, I don't know, not wonderful, maybe it's not a good word to say, wonderfully sharing your painful experiences but you bring it into this space in such a powerful way that really illuminates a lot of things. Thank you so much for that. And we'll get back to you hopefully after our next speaker, who is Saghi Ghahreman. We're also very honored to have Saghi here with us today. And Saghi is a wonderful writer and activist, and she lives in Toronto. But I would like to read her biography here for you as well. So, born in Iran, Saghi Ghahreman, an Iranian poet, lives in exile in Canada currently. Ghahreman founded Gilgameshan Books and founded and operated PEN Canada is the Exile Writers Club for 2 years. She has been running the Iranian queer organization from 2008 to 2019. Published her first collection of poetry of lies in 1998, and by 2003 published 3 more poetry collections and 1 collection of short stories. The Whore is the Savior, Saghi Ghahreman, All in All, But When You're Alone, Being a Cow is Painful. Welcome, Saghi Jan, and we invite you to share your words with us. Saghi, you are okay.
No, I'm not on. Okay. Thank you, Nasim Jan, and thank everybody else who spoke before me, and I got this chance to listen to everyone. I start reading my piece. I start with my name, because my name is the first identifying factor in my mind when I'm observing or reporting myself. I don't have an understanding of my gender, whether female or male, but I've been living in the skin of a woman all my life. Even though most of the time I was unaware of this body, still it means I have more understanding of how a female body functions and feels, whereas my understanding of a male body is only secondhand knowledge. Right after my name, the other factor of my identity is how I choose to manipulate and be manipulated by words within my poetry and fiction. I was raised to become a writer, more precisely a poet. My parents never mentioned any other calling or career when I was growing up. Writing was the obvious choice. But regardless of what my parents thought, the force behind the desire to write was the fate of my grandmothers, both victims of rigid rules of an exiled clan of Qajar dynasty. I am doubtful about their gender identity and sexual orientation, since both were labeled hysterical women and unwilling to commit to wifely duties. I had the strangest urge to discover how they felt as victims of brutality, one dying at 28, battered by her husband, the other dying at 38, chained to the wall of a room in her father's mansion. Even though I haven't seen either one of them, I believe I have inherited their memories of mental struggles. When I write, I am very much aware that my mind is greater than a single self, in the sense that I am more than my single self. I published 4 collections of poetry from 1997 until 2003, as Nasim mentioned, and a collection of short stories. When the first book came out, it was the continuation of all the commotion that started with the first short story I published. I received a lot of threats from all over Canada, America, Europe, where Iranian community lived, and were upset by the indecency I put in the relationship between a man and woman inside the marriage. And they wanted me to stop, and they wanted me to respect. All of them were political activists, almost all of them Marxist, and almost all of them advocated for women's rights and freedom. But that is how it went, because the way I wrote was not limited to the small steps the Iranian community outside of Iran wanted to take and be safe. As Nasim also mentioned, it was around 2000 that I joined PEN Canada as a writer in exile, and a year later initiated and moderated the Writers in Exile Club, where many of us writers in exile heard our own voice reading our own poetry and fiction in English. Before that, for all of us, as everybody mentioned there, it was strange to hear ourselves talking in any other language, especially the language of the host country, when we were trying to find a place for ourselves in, but still we would remain strangers in the country. English language to me was a huge refuge. I wrote in English what couldn't be imagined or blurted out in Farsi, or I wrote in English what my mature self experienced in Canada, away from the Farsi sphere of my memories, could put in writing. I wrote the long poems of my mother's mother, the Minister of Labor, also The Child is 18, the Iceland, Crossdressers in English, all of which losing originality when translated into Farsi. I must add that after living in Canada for 35 years, I don't speak English. My mind keeps English words far from reach when I need to express myself. I haven't published any new work after 2003. I was busy creating and running Iranian Queer Organization. With a number of colleagues, the organization was voluntarily dissolved when I decided it was time to let go in 2019. Here I would like to relate to the topic of the panel, why women write. Not all women write. Only those who are writers write, which could mean that a person would write even if born with a male body, and wouldn't write in a female body if the person was not a writer. Not all women write. Putting every female body in one box is not only suffocating, but also is comparable to the oppressive patriarchy that considers any female body identical to the next. Patriarchy believes any female body feels and wishes and aims in the exact same way all other female bodies and mind would, or patriarchy would like them to be exactly the same. So I think by saying why women write without mentioning that some of these women are not living in the skin of a woman, and some women aren't writing as a woman, we are dismissing a big portion of reasons any one of us write. But why do those women who write? Some of us living in the skin of a woman write to state the fact that we are not women. In other words, we are queering womanhood. We are writing ourselves. Writing down is an act of protesting the uniform identity forced upon us. I believe that freedom and equality for women wouldn't actualize unless the borders of manhood and womanhood are blurred, starting at the level of gender and sex boundaries, not the other way around, not starting in the workplaces, in state politics. As a writer, I have an open relationship with my audience, my readership. I am not committed to pleasing them, and they are not forced to read me or obliged to keep reading me. I have been told that I belong to different groups of people, to several minorities, to a gender, to a sex. I never feel actually belong to any one of them. And I think this not belonging to anywhere and not being forced or willing to committing to any one of them is one of the factors that releases me from being crushed in the intersections of all these identities. And at the end, I think one of the good results and promising results of women writing is to take away the identity for women that is known whenever we try to fight for equality for women. As long as we are committed to women and men, I don't think it will go anywhere. Maybe we should go back to why people would write, to change these boundaries to understandings of themselves, gender mostly, instead of for me at least, finding meaning in women's writing. I have listened to many women in the Qajar clans and Iranian women, Iranian Marxist women, women in Canada, women of LGBT communities. I have gone through a very painful and harsh experience during my marriage, in living in the societies in Iran, in Turkey, in Canada. I'm not a stranger to the oppressions, but still I believe that the first label that should be taken away is being women, being a man. Thank you, Nasim Jan.
Thank you so much, Saghi. Thank you for bringing all these insightful arguments and your thoughts, your words here, and also your experiences, which is very important to us and to this international space. I think each one of you made a very very important contribution to this panel, and we are so happy about that. And we're gonna go ahead with reading some of the comments for you. Jane Champion says, beautiful and powerful words, and beautifully and powerfully spoken. Nasrin. We must all do what we can to save the 16 and share the petition widely. Thank you. Savita says, very moving, Saghi.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Katia says, thank you for your profound words, Nasrin Parvaz. Sushma says, greetings to all, great session. Neeti Singh says, thank you, Savita, loved your profound insights and observations. And Christine says, beautiful, thank you for sharing. So what other things you would like to share with us, Katia, Nasrin, Neeti, Savita, and Saghi? Would you like to share anything, any words that you think you didn't have time to share with us here?
I would actually, if I have time. I write sometimes in Farsi and English both, and I try to fuse the two languages together. And one of these poems is a narrator who is a female admiring a male body which is not specifically masculine. I would like to read some of that. Let me find that.
Thank you. That would be great.
Thank you. It's called Nude. پوست آهو کشیده به تن. Yes.
Sorry, I just didn't mean to stop you. Sorry.
No, so I can start again.
Yes.
All right. پوست آهو کشیده به تن. Nude. Standing, slanted erect, like trees teasing the wind. His unbraided hair linger on shoulder blades, nude. He's pulled deerskin over his flesh, به ناز. ایستاده خیال میکنم اما همین فقط ایستاده اما به ناز, not bent, not straight. Leaning his temple on the wall, the sun, now gone, splashed on his skin. He tips with the tip of a toe the pillow, not falling on the foot of the bed in this room, which is not a bedroom but a cafe, where I sleep at nights with all the beer and gaze at his skin, at him, nude, naked, nude. در را به هم میزند، پنجره را به هم میزند، سرد است، لخت است، زیر لایه های لباس، دستش را میکشد بیرون، rubs on my eyes, my lips, opens my eyes, my legs, so that I go ahead again, not come back, not in sleep, not in person, and my mouth agape, I wonder, here, not to inhale, doesn't look like sucking, this swallowing up. I am sinking, I'm not coming here, اینجا که ایستاده او باد وزیده به ایستادنش همیشه naked, under layers of shirts, color over color. I stop here.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I know Savita is a poet too, and we read poetry together in a Bombay festival. So
yes.
would you like to share? So
Maybe we could together sometime, Savita.
Yeah. So maybe I would read something. You know, I was talking about squirrels and all those kinds of things. You know, like for women, it is wonderful not to be just focused on men. You know, we have to take our gaze off and look at other things and appreciate women saying that we should not be prioritizing or centralizing either straight bodies like feminine or masculine. You know, there's kinds of multiplicities of reality and layers of reality. That's what we have.
I am bisexual, so I think I am allowed to write about both genders' bodies.
Sure. Appreciated that. Yeah. So do you think I should read a poem if you have time? Yeah? All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. We have time. So any one of the panelists, if you would like to read poems or a piece of your work, you're more than welcome to do that.
Before that, I should tell you, otherwise I'll forget, that my French collection, Je suis de la Maison d'Étiole, it's dedicated to Rabia Basri. See?
Maybe my family.
Nasim, you should know.
So I am Basiri, not Basiri, but
but she was a poet of the Middle East, probably born in Iraq, and I think she was like our wonderful poets predecessors, like Akka Mahadevi and those kinds of poets. Very enlightening. So I indebted to her, and for a very long time I'm very respectful to people who live in that region and write and struggle and oppose the imperial order that we have today, the modern imperial order of capitalism run by Western part of the world. The poem is To Be With. I knew all the trees of neighborhood marked by lovers, their names inscribed secretly on their trunk, leaves that shed tears for me. I knew the squirrels jumping all over and birds that shared life of the silent inhabitants around these trees. For there are legion forlorn, courageous, and handsome beings living without hope of ever witnessing a change in their fortunes. Curiously, I also knew when the rain would come, and these secret multicolored birds would flutter their wings to alert those about to be doomed. And that this rainwater would flood the nests of the naive and the tactless, even though sometimes it soothes the hearts of the bewildered ones. Lately, I have come to know that prayers of the needy get entangled with forces unknown in the lower zones of the stratosphere, never reaching the highest ever. And all the good wishes for these people crumble before they become effective in the very heart of their well-wishers. That way the birds, squirrels, and the trees with their tear-shedding leaves are still the best things for them to know and to be with.
Thank you so much, Savita. That was really beautiful. Thanks. But before we go to the next speaker or next panelist, there is a question for Saghi here from Ghazal Tahiri. So Ghazal says, Saghi, that was beautiful. Why did you decide to write a poem in both English and Farsi?
First of everything, that was a challenge for myself. I wanted to see if both languages can rhyme while they don't normally rhyme. Like one language has different stresses and a completely different accent, the other one a different one. I wanted to see if I can make them to follow one rhythm through the end. Also, for me, it was another, challenge to write about the body of a man through the eye of a woman. The beloved, and just admiring the body, nothing aside from that. It's not love, it's desire of the body. It's expressing a loss for that body. And lost is expresses differently in Farsi and in English. I wanted to see if I can bring them both closer to each other when I am writing, if my mind can work to bring the two different languages to talk about loss from my point of view, and in this two fused languages together. Thank you, Ghazal, for the question.
Thank you, Ghazal, and thank you, Saghi. So I know Katia has a poem for us to read. thank you for that, and we invite you to read it.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to share this poem, spirit of all of the women here, women all over, who are still silenced, looking for ways to make their voices heard. This is a poem I wrote a long time ago. It appeared in this journal called Phoebe. And this is a university of George Washington University. It's called Hide the Doll. Grand-mère hid Martine underground to keep her plastic breasts from budding. Mare petite la, she said. Mare petite la, bind the doll. Grand-mère grafted Martine to the roots of the loofah tree to stop her from running. Bind the doll, she said, bind the doll. Mare petite la. Grand-mère thought I would forget the spun gold on Martine's head, the eyes of burnished blue swiveling for a wedding dress, and pearl earrings to match. A short little poem.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So you also mix languages. Wow, that is amazing. That is actually, I had a discussion with one of my friends who is a poet from Hyderabad, and she was like, it's an act of resistance. And Saghi, Beth Soltani says, I agree, I love hearing the mix of language, and love that, Katia.
No, thank you.
Nasrin Parvaz also says, mixing languages is difficult and beautiful.
I agree.
So, Neeti and Nasrin, would you like to share any of your works or poems with us? And also, I would like to say that our webinars has no structure. So we try to, organize these webinars in a non-traditional way, so the panelists can do whatever they want. So we have no plan, no structure, especially when it comes to the literature and literary panels. Nasrin?
I can read a poem.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. It's a short poem in Alien, Fly on the Wall Press, Winter Edition, Issue 8.
Thank you.
Red on white. Holding her child's hand, pregnant, panicked, she looks for her ticket in her bag. The police drag her onto the white platform in a white country. The child is frozen, lost behind boots, watching the stream of blood coming out from between her mother's legs. Thank you.
Can you read that again?
Nasrin, can you read the poem again?
Sure, thank you. Red on white, holding her child's hand, pregnant. Panicked, she looks for her ticket in her bag. The police drag her onto the white platform in a white country. The child is frozen, lost behind boots, watching the stream of blood coming out from between her mother's legs.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And Neeti, also, I would like to ask the participants that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask and unmute yourself or put it in the chat box.
Nasim?
Yes.
Someone I just saw, Beth wrote something for Saghi to read a poem. I don't know if you can see that.
No,
Yeah.
I don't see it.
I see that Beth Soltani says, I looked up your page earlier. Can you read I Hang Myself? Powerful.
Yeah, I can't find it. I have to go through my
Okay.
books and find it.
Maybe we can post it later for them in the event.
You can.
Yeah. Thank you. And Beth Soltani says Nasrin poem was powerful and beautiful. Thank you, Nasrin. Neeti John, now it's your turn.
Thank you, Nasim. Actually, I don't have very feminist poems to share at the moment. Can I share some?
Doesn't need to be feminist.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll read two very short poems from my one and only published collection called The Serpent of Slumber. These are poems, I wrote these poems while listening to classical Hindustani music. In Baroda, we have the Maharaja Sayaji Rao's, legacy and this huge palace and traditions of classical concerts. So as a student, when I was doing my post-graduation, I was a regular visitor there. And one would listen to these amazing renderings in the Hindustani ragas and get lost, sort of go into a trance. And there are a couple of poems which I wrote, and that's when I decided that I wanted to work for my PhD on Kabir and Nanak and the Bhakti poets. So I'll just share two short poems. I don't know if they'll make sense to the global.
It will definitely make sense.
Bhakti is mystic, mysticism. So these are two mystic poems. One is Come Lift Me. This won a prize at the All India Poetry Competition years back. Okay. In a red skirt and saffron scarf, I went. To my Lord's house, I went. The steps singed my feet. The steep, tall walls questioned me. I turned, my Lord, from the eighth step and took to the streets. The beggars pulled my clothes. I exchanged them for their rags and shed my only gold, a ring, in the thick black pond by their huts. In open hair and blackened clothes, pit dogs chased me for fun. A mad woman kissed me, and a serpent once mistook my neck for a tree. My dear, come to me, come, lift me. Under the people by the gutter one morning, while bathing, I slipped. My skull hit the rock, and my Lord smiled. Oh, how I ran, leaving in my haste my naked black body in the water. And one more. It's called.
We have time, so please take your time and read poems for us. It's so much fun.
It is fun. Thank you, Nasim, for making it such fun. And one more, just a short one, okay?
Don't believe in this kind of panels that you should sit like presidents and, we don't like it. Honestly, I personally don't like it. And I know, people in literary communities also don't like to do that.
Hey, Neeti,
Yes.
this is Sushma, and I went to MS University Baroda in 90 to 92 for my MSc in biotechnology. And when you were reading this poem, I remember the campus and everything that you described.
Yes, I was there on the campus in those years.
Yeah.
Lovely to meet you, Sushma, like this.
So I'm here in Oregon now, in the same university where Nasim is, and
Professor Naithani is a poet also. And we
Awesome.
did a lot of poems together in poetry gatherings. And
Has she got a poem to read tonight?
We
I
would
mean,
love to hear her.
here.
that would be great, actually. That's a great idea. So
I would also like Nasrin to read one more poem, if you could.
Okay,
Nasrin, that was a lovely poem that you read.
If I may say this very quickly, I think it's wonderful that here we are all gathered here. Some are saying tonight, some are saying this afternoon, some are saying this morning. So we were all congregated from various parts of the world, various time zones. And so I'm thankful to Zoom for bringing us together in this one space, in spite of our various the various areas in which we live.
That's very true, and that's what I love about it, because at IUAES, you know, we always organize conferences and congresses all over the world, and it's really difficult to bring these, you know, diverse voices all together, and you know, because of so many hypocrisies and bureaucracies that exist in terms of visas and also the expenses and lots of other factors that stop us from especially bringing people that are not in the academia, which is very important to bring those voices and you know, challenge that hegemony that exists in academia. Anyways, this is wonderful, really wonderful. We got Neeti in Baroda in India. We got Saghi in Toronto, Nasrin from London, and Katia you're in Baltimore, and then Savita here from Bombay.
No, Delhi.
Delhi, sorry. Yeah, anyway, it's great to have all of you here. And Saghi, did you find your poem?
I found it in the original language in Farsi. I don't know if reading Farsi would. Yeah.
Read it in
You can read it in Farsi. We would like to hear it.
Yeah, read it in Farsi.
And Nasim, you should be also reading a poem.
Me?
I'm so sorry. I'm creating a feminist order here. Feminist symbolic order.
Okay, I'll find my poems.
خودم را دار میزنم. پاهایم را از هم وا کردم، از اندرونم بیرون خزیدند، زیبا بودند. شاید حتی صدای عشقبازی بودند وقتی لبهاشان به خنده وا میشد، وقتی انگشتم را روی لبهاشان یا روی چال گونه هاشان میمالیدم. شاید نسیم را روی سینه‌ام میکشاندند. حتی وقتی که قد کشیدند و از شانه‌های من بالاتر جستند. شاید صدای عشقبازی بودند و بوی یاس میدادند که من هوای بازی، حتی هوای عشقبازی نداشتم. چشمهاشان هنوز به خوابم میآید و دستهاشان که گرم و کوچک بود و از دیوارهای خونالود تن میکشید توی دستهای من. قلبم کنار بالششان بود، اما باد می آمد. باد تکه تکه می برد. بندها را بر می چینند. طناب را باز می کنند. دستها را از گلویم بر می دارند. حالا خودم را دار می زنم. باد می کنم جسدم را و بوی مرده می گیرم. از این همه صورت که مثل صورتک می خندد، یکی نمی گوید درخت، یا اینکه از درخت آویزان است، هیبت هولناکی دارد. حالا خودم را چال می کنم.
We went into a tunnel with you.
And I found the translation of your poetry, by the way.
Yes, yeah, I know. And
Yeah,
somebody did a beautiful dance on this.
yes, I'm gonna play it right now.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
To watch
Yeah.
it.
Beautiful.
Right. Let me just share my screen.
Mm.
Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I splayed my legs. They crawled out of me. Oh, they were beautiful. Maybe even the sound of lovemaking when their lips parted in a smile. When I rubbed my fingers on their lips or their dimpled cheeks. Maybe they pulled the breeze over my breast. Maybe even when they spurted past me, there was still the sound of lovemaking and smelled of jasmine. Why I never craved play or lovemaking. I still dream of their eyes and their warm, small hands that pulled themselves into mine from my bloody insides. My heart was at their pillow, but it was windy, and piece by piece the wind carried away. They picked the bonds, they loosened the rope, they removed their hands from my neck. Now I myself hang myself. I swell my corpse and reek of the dead. None of these mask-like laughing faces ever say, tree, or that which hangs from the tree has a horrifying presence. Now I myself bury myself. But the sky didn't rain and it didn't grow and the wind didn't carry a vague hint and no one rose from anywhere to say, what does love mean? The smile vanishes. I lie down on my wounds. I have a frightened look. My name keeps dividing. I splayed my legs. They crawled out of me. They were beautiful. With their warm little hands that have their sharp nails fastened onto my bloody walls within.
Thank you for finding that translation dance.
That was amazing.
So powerful.
We're actually lucky that somebody found it here, right? Katia, that was you. Thank you. Anyways, okay, so any other thoughts to share, or if you have any final words, we would love to hear it.
I'd like to say thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And it was very nice to meet everybody. Thank you so very much. And I will post you put that up for us, Nasim already the link for those students or the children, the people who are risking now, who are in danger of being executed, that we share that link. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here today. Nasrin.
Can I say something, Nasim?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I wrote this book about the agriculture in Hindi.
Oh.
And
can you read the poem for us also?
Yeah, I had one poetry collection in Hindi and another one is coming in English shortly. So it was
wonderful.
This came in 2011, so I think almost now 10 years.
So can you read a Hindi poem then? I can at least understand.
Yeah, I can actually.
And I can understand.
Yeah, yes. Neeti can also understand. So you have two people.
I have
I
have a translation of those poems in English as well. So what I can do, I can actually read one poem that is in English, translation of the original Hindi poem.
Okay.
And so it is about, when you turn 40 here in US and other places, they ask you to go through mammogram. And it's very painful. I think many of you might have experienced that. And I think that alternative technology is available. And it's just because of the insurance companies and all those constraints that they ask women to go through a crude technology. So it is my experience, and the name of the poem is Mammogram. As I approached 40, my doctor suggested a baseline mammogram. I procrastinated. For a while, genetics was my excuse. But after 4 years, I succumbed, as 75% breast cancer remained unexplained. Before my appointment, an unease shrouded me for a few days. I slogged at work, I slogged at home, I slept okay. On the inevitable day, I handed my breast one by one to an older woman technician for sliding and fixing inside a cold metallic machine. Each time, when that thing pounded, an X-ray beam passed, I held my breath. I clenched my teeth. For coping through the day, I had a book in my bag, but couldn't open it until the bedtime. This is how a series of nuisance began.
Thank you. Thanks. It was really moving and beautiful. Okay, let's go home.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nasim.
Thank
you, Ozlem.
you, everyone. It was such a great panel and very dear to our heart. We really appreciate and respect everything you brought here for us today. We learned a lot. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have another gathering with you somewhere else after pandemic.
Thank you. Well, everyone.
Thank you for bringing us together.
Yeah, have a good night or,
Nasim,
wherever you are.
Thank you.
I thought you were going to read your own poem, Nasim. That should be the finale.
Yeah. Do that. Before we say bye-bye.
There is no time.
I tried.
That's
why. Okay. So I'm gonna read 2 of my poems that was published north of Oxford a few years ago. Can't Talk. So the first one is Can't Talk, searching for clues and glimpses of paradoxical nature of reality in tales of captivity of the streets and valleys, empty of souls, empty of voices. Alas, these maimed and tortured bodies can't talk. So the second poem is Silver Color Road. Unable to run with her shaking legs and a whole melting sea in her eyes, and the smell of tobacco is burning her frozen toes, drying off wounds of a frightened mind, thinking of a silver color road through her visible skirt, smelling like dust and blood. So I don't think it's nice to read poems in front of wonderful poets and writers like you. But again, thank you so much. I hope you liked it.
Yes, yes.
Love it. Can't talk.
Yeah, thank you.
I sent you the link. Nasim. So if you look for it, I sent you the link.
Katia, you're amazing. We should organize panels together. You're helping me. Okay. Thank you. And goodbye for sure and for real. Thank you, everyone. So lovely to have you here and to see you. Bye.
See you.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
It was really nice. Love
Very nice.
every speaker, all the poems. Wonderful. Good
Bye.
night from New Delhi.
Good night.
God bless from Baroda. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.